Trial of Richard Allen, it is underway right now in Delphi, Indiana, and it's a case that obviously has captivated us for quite some time. Is Richard Allen guilty of killing those two girls on that bridge, Abby Williams and Libby German, back in February of 2017? It's a case that, from what we're seeing now in the courtroom, relying thus far heavily on eyewitness testimony. We all know eyewitness testimony, yeah, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be all over the board, and that's what we've seen thus far. Joining me to discuss, Robin Dreek, retired FBI special agent, chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's start with eyewitness testimony before we even get into what we've heard at the trial itself. Let's talk about its reliability, and how that is gauged from person to person.
Yeah, our eyewitness testimony is always subject to context of the individual receiving the information, time from the time it was observed to the time it was recorded and reiterated on someone else. Influences that come to us between the time of viewing the information or the event, as well as the time of recounting it to someone else,
Hmm.
the input that was happening there, because that's what we're seeing in the court is I'm seeing potential for a lot of false memories being planted here
Yeah.
by just by someone making a suggestion, it could be this or it could be this to someone that was an eyewitness. That really influences what we remember,
Hmm.
and that's why one of the great tenets of doing investigations is a simple one: go where the evidence brings you. And evidence is generally very tangible, tactile types of things. And eyewitness testimony generally is not that tangible, tactile kind of evidence you're looking for. And so it's can be extremely subjective in a lot of different ways, from not just how they're recounting it, the individual that saw it, the age, the time span, all these things make it extremely subjective, which makes it a very challenging case for prosecution to rely on that alone.
Let me ask you this, because the jury is hearing a lot of testimony from different eyewitnesses in this case so far. Some of the eyewitness testimony seeming to be pretty accurate, actually, and backed up and proven with surveillance footage. That would be the testimony thus far of a woman who was out hiking on the bridge, used it quite regularly for that. Uh, Noticed Richard Allen's car when she entered the trail. When she came back, his car was gone, and that's a key piece of this whole case thus far. Uh, from Betsy Blair, that's the name of the woman who has given this testimony, because if that's true and her timeline lines up of the time she says she left the parking lot and got in her car and Richard Allen's car was gone, um, of him not being there. And that same time point is when the state is saying he was in the woods killing those kids. It actually shows that he would have already gone for his walk and left and had been on with his day. If in fact he went to his car and left just as he kind of said he did. That's some interesting testimony. She also claims that she did see him out there as well, and actually had more of an accurate physical description. You have two people who were 16 at the time, two girls who were out there now in their 20s testifying to this, and both of them claiming they saw a bridge guy, quote unquote, very dramatically different descriptions of the guy, like almost like it could be a completely different person. I almost kind of wonder if it was. Um, so you have consistent and very inconsistent over here. Um, One with timestamps and receipts to go with it. The other one, just these two girls recollecting what they saw when they were 16, and now that was 2017. So they're in their 20s now. Let's talk about the accuracy of that and how a jury's going to perceive that, where one seems to be pretty on par and the other one's like all over the board.
Yeah, it's not beyond reasonable doubt, is it?
I mean, it certainly kind of creates some doubt. I mean, in terms of like the information that's coming in, it's just the reliability of the information is what's at question. And I wonder if they're going to look at the two girls, the younger girls' testimony, and go, that's not reliable, and it's eyewitness. Why is this one reliable over here? Even though there's a lot more that backs up the other one. If it's just kind of be throw the baby out with the bathwater, all eyewitness testimony is bunk, because with these two girls over here, it was really very scratchy.
So with this case, this is man, I can't even believe I'm kind of saying this because normally I'm always saying where there's smoke, there tends to be fire.
Hmm.
And definitely Richard Allen was in the area.
Yeah.
I think that's irrefutable. You know,
Hmm.
he was seen, he was observed, he's in the area. So that's smoke. But we're trying to draw that smoke to the fire of the death.
Yeah.
And normally when you're seeing eyewitness accounts and testimony and things like this, whether they're consistent, inconsistent, all these things, now what we want to do is we want to back it up with tangible physical evidence
Hmm.
of these things, which is really lacking here. And
Yeah.
that's what, so to me, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters, the credibility, lack of credibility, accuracy, inaccuracy. All right. So he was there. So
Hmm.
that has smoke. And so now we need to back the smoke up with tangible evidence of fire, linking him to the actual deaths of 2 girls.
Hmm.
I still think I I just still do not, and I've been trying to follow this as closely as possible, looking for something the prosecution has that they have in the investigation that will physically link him to the actual site where the girls died.
Hmm.
The lack of DNA evidence, that is what's really striking to me here on two evidence, and I'm probably jumping ahead on you on this
No,
one.
you're fine.
But here's why that is bothersome to me. It's either indicating, it could be indicating multiple things. One, incompetence of the investigators, which we have a lot of data points for potential incompetence of the investigators, so
Yes.
we can't throw that out. So that's a possibility. The other possibility is he wasn't there and didn't do it,
Hmm.
which is innocence. And another possibility, which is also to me extremely remote, and I'll tell you why in a second, is that he was there, he did do it, and he was so good at covering his tracks and his DNA footprint that he's able to wipe it clean.
Hmm.
But when you look at his courtroom behavior of and all the reports of extreme mental duress, mental illness, and all his courtroom behavior of pacifying behaviors and all these things and the trauma, does that strike you as the type of individual to have the cognizant ability to pull off high crimes and misdemeanors of murder and have the wherewithal to cover his tracks to get away with it in this way?
Yeah.
So when you look at, again, when you're using conjecture, you're always going to miss a data point in there. But from the optic I have, the data points are leaning towards I just can't still make that connection. Besides the fact of they have not demonstrated a known link between him and the girls.
Hmm.
Random killings of 2 females by 1 male being totally random. Now
Hmm.
they happen, but again, when you're looking at law percentages, there's very, very, very low. There wasn't a
Yeah.
stalking, there wasn't I mean, it's not fitting a pattern of what you'd expect to see for this type of murder.
Yeah, we are certainly not seeing like at least as of now a
As
digital
of now.
footprint or anything, which you think probably would have been introduced by this point of some sort of evidence of like on his phone he was stalking the girls or whatever on the
Mhm.
device. Nothing. There's nothing. It's just because he seems to be just living his normal life. And then suddenly one day, according to the prosecution, just snaps and decides to kill these 2 girls. Um, Completely bizarre.
And I apologize, Tony, too.
Yeah.
And no other run-in with the law,
None.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
See, it's such
It doesn't make any
this
sense. No.
massive spike.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it's a huge spike in behavior. I will say this, we're talking about eyewitness testimony and we've heard, many people in the courtroom. I know many people who are there. Bob Mata, defense attorney, host of the podcast Defense Diaries. He's on the ground with us and he's giving us daily updates. But I'm checking other folks too, other people that we know and they're reporting, people I trust, people that have been contributors in other stories here. And it's interesting because the observation on Richard Allen in that courtroom, very different from person to person.
Yeah.
Again, these are people I trust. These are good reporters. I talked with Bob Mata last night, and I asked him about that because I heard from some others that he's sitting there acting very, I guess, verklempt, like when the photos were being shown, swaying back and forth, this and that.
Mhm.
That's what some of the reporting said. We don't have a camera, so we don't really know. And I asked Bob, he's like, I haven't seen any of that. He's like, I don't know what they're talking about. He's like, number one, it's hard to see him face forward the way it's all set up. But number two, he's like, I'm not watching him all the time, but I'm seeing him interact with his attorneys. He's asking questions. He seems to be really with it, according to Bob. He's like, if we didn't know these other things about him, I don't think we'd even be questioning his competency in the courtroom right now. It's just interesting as we
Yeah.
view all of it through each of our lenses, which is understandable because we've heard
Yep.
stories of him. We've seen him in court looking pretty like out of it. But apparently this time not so much. But if you're already expecting that, that's, some confirmation bias right there.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you hit it right there. If you have an optic and lens of something you've heard before, that's your brain, as a human species, as a human being, we love to try to identify patterns.
Yeah.
And so that's why the same thing here with eyewitness accounts, they're going to try to identify a pattern that they can do. And also remember, people want to be the person that is the savior, the one
Mhm.
that cracked the case wide open, the one that solved the crime, because they want to be their part of doing justice. And so
Sure.
they might try again. These aren't conscious negative things people are doing. It's just a law of our human nature,
Yeah.
is that we're going to see things that might not have been there, that we want to make happen, that we want to have been part of this, that we want to have seen the killer and did our part
Yeah.
for due diligence and justice for the families. Um, Still not adding up to me on this one, though.
No, I mean, and there's two parts I want to talk about here. The confession letter, which they brought up as being this is a big deal. Look at his confession letter.
Yep.
I mean, it looks like something that maybe a kindergartner wrote. Big weird letters. It's not really consistent. It's all over the board on a piece of paper. It was a recreation that a reporter made because we can't see the actual evidence itself, but it doesn't look like the work of anyone who's competent. Right? And like
Right.
a note, like I hope I can say sorry to the families. It's just it's not the work of someone who's writing a confession letter. In my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah, I agree. We've talked about the confessions earlier on as well. The way he was treated in the court system, the way his mental health has been talked about, so we don't know whether it is or isn't, but there's issues there, and the
Yeah.
issues by the way he's been treated, and the fact that you described what that letter looks like. That's not shocking or surprising. I am not, and that Gull's allowing, the judge is allowing the confessions to
Mhm.
stand because they weren't coerced. She said, uh, coercion
Yeah.
and mental anguish. Where's that line drawn? Um,
Mental anguish essentially is coercion at a certain
it is
point.
to me.
It's exactly what that is. I mean, you're breaking someone down, and
Yeah,
and it
in
doesn't.
isolation for how long,
Yeah,
in
and
his filth. Ugh.
and how reliable is that, especially from the spy world, Robin? Of breaking someone down to get information. How often do you actually get accurate information by doing that, or do people just eventually crack and say whatever they think you want to hear to stop you from doing what they're doing to you?
It's funny you bring that up. You're so right, though. I never, ever, ever, and that's a very definitive line.
Hmm.
I have never used it, never done it, because it is the most sure way to have someone not tell you the truth,
Hmm.
because people will say anything to allow themselves to feel safe again. So when you start, and a great friend of mine, Jack Schaefer, wrote the book, The Truth Detector, as well as The Like Switch, as well. My other friend, Joe Navarro, the body language expert. All these people will tell you, even using the word of elicitation, they won't even use the word of elicitation where you're compelling someone to tell you the truth, and they think it's all manipulation, and everything. But we use this thought process and phraseology differently. We think, how do you inspire someone to share the truth with you before they have an opportunity to lie?
Hmm.
And the way you do that is you allow them to feel safe, that it's okay to tell you the truth. There's lots of interviewing strategies to engage, but you're going to do things like rationalizations, projections, minimizers. You're going to help someone feel safe that it's okay to share information which might not be in their best interest. And you do that by not coercing, by not cajoling, by not definitely not using manipulation or subterfuge, because all those things do not allow the other human being on the other side to feel safe with sharing information with you. The worst thing you can do to inspire confession is to show someone their shame. Another great author I love, Mike Reddington, he's a certified forensic interviewer. That is the worst thing you can do. And he's gotten people to confess just to minor things, shoplifting,
Hmm.
in stores where they have no video evidence, but he was able to inspire them to share that they, did the shoplifting thing, because the last thing he did in the world was he showed them their shame. He used what we call deep, deep empathy,
Mhm.
which is seeing the world through someone else's context and lens. And so all those things to me were missing when getting these confessions, and even I have other friends that worked at Guantanamo Bay, doing interrogations of terrorists. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
It does not work. I always say, I worked a lot of confidential human sources in my career in the FBI. I always said this. I said, I'd rather have 7 people give me 120% of their effort willingly than 100 people give me 5% of their effort unwillingly.
Mhm.
Because you can't trust any of the information. So it's always about the behaviors of trust are really simple: open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability. When you display those behaviors, you make the conversation about the other person. You don't show them their shame. You inspire them then to want to share the truth before they have an opportunity to lie. There's my
So
long monologue.
no, so you're saying locking someone in a solitary room for years on end with no trial and very weak evidence against them, and then to be tormented by judges or by prison guards with Odinist patches on for years on end, that may produce unreliable results.
So as a behaviorist, it's really funny. No kidding, Tony.
Yeah, yeah.
You're exactly right. So as a behaviorist, when I hear things like that, I no longer am listening. I mean, my mind automatically tunes out to what the individual that's locked up says.
Yeah.
My mind automatically goes to what inspired them to want to do that to him.
Yeah.
So my mind shifts not from
Mhm.
him, but to those that inflicted that on him, because that says more about them than anything coming out of Alan's mouth
Yeah.
in that situation, because that can't even be counted. It's why, I've known and I've worked with polygraphers my entire career. Polygraphers will tell you the same thing.
Mhm.
The polygraph machine is a great prop. When used well as a great prop, it inspires people to tell the truth before they have an opportunity to lie. Because all the machine does is measure physiological responses to stresses and thoughts.
Mhm.
That's why, when you're working in the spy world and you're working with people that have, like intelligence officers on the opposite side, they fall in love with their own narrative. They can lie all day long and completely pass a polygraph because they believe it.
Yeah.
Method actors are the same thing in the movie industry.
Yeah.
If you're a method actor, you are living that life of who you are. And I guarantee you, they could probably pass a polygraph when they're in method acting role for a role they're doing because
Mhm.
they're so into that character. It's who they are.
Yeah.
That's why polygraph is not admissible in court
Yeah.
because, again, it just measures physiological responses. So any physiological response Alan has to the stressors he was under, what he's saying in those situations, I'm not really paying attention. I'm paying attention to who are the people doing it to him
Yeah.
and what was their purpose for doing that?
Yeah. Confirmation bias, I would guess, in a lot of cases. It's like, we got our guy. This is the guy who did that to those kids. And if you're not a
And we're
deep
gonna make
thinker,
them
you're going to
confess.
feel, oh, yeah, he's a horrible human being. You still can't do that to a prisoner. I mean, when you get your wits about you and you're not thinking like a 10-year-old anymore, it's like, yeah, you can't torture the prisoners. They have to go to court. But if you're still thinking like a 10-year-old, you're like, yeah, let's poke him with a stick and nobody's going to stop us because that's the atmosphere, that's the climate of that prison, which it seems like it kind of was, according to many of the reports that we've heard. Let's talk about one other issue here. That's the unspent bullet that they found at the crime scene. Apparently, it was like face down into the mud. Um, this is literally the only physical thing that the state is saying connects Richard Allen to it. Why? Because he has a weapon that could put this bullet in it, technically. Um, so did all the police who walked around that scene for hours and days, and there was a lot of them. And they found the bullet, by the way, after the police were on the scene, walking around looking at it. They argue that the science of this, of the bullet itself, if you look at it, that it would have been cycled through this gun. Now that science, it's not the most reliable, especially for an unspent bullet as well. This thing was not fired through the weapon. It was just allegedly cycled through. I mean, this is what they're putting a lot of weight on. How much weight does something like that truly hold when that is the only thing that they say could technically connect him to the scene?
A forensic firearms expert is gonna have to show how it's actually an Allen's gun. I have a Sig Sauer. Does that make me a suspect in this? It is a
Apparently,
very
according to
common
Delphi,
weapon, very
yes.
common. So here's my other question. So here's my advice to defense on this one. So here's a man that seemingly, if it is him, was able to and have the wherewithal to scrub the entire scene of all his DNA, but he
Yeah,
leaves a bullet behind.
yeah,
Spike from the pattern.
yeah.
So it's either one or the other. He's either really, really good murderer or really, really bad murderer. And if he's really, really bad, he would have left a bullet and a lot of DNA evidence.
If you're strangling two children and slitting their throats, there's a good likelihood that you're going to have some DNA on them, in some way, shape, or form. It's very rare that you would not have anything. So either
I
it's a
know.
did they not examine the crime scene well enough, or they did and they just don't have the pieces that add up to him. I mean, hell, they found hair in one of the girl's hands. Allegedly, it belongs to a family member who's female. That doesn't help a whole lot, although it does make you question why do you have a handful of your family member's hair, which I guess is a
Mhm.
pretty valid question at a murder scene. But it's there's just more that continues to come in here that does not point to Richard Allen. Um,
It just
I'm waiting.
This is more to me a case of, and it's sad because the families are still looking for justice. Alan's looking for justice, but this seems to be a case of really, really bad police work to me.
Yeah, it feels like that, and I've said it from the beginning. Is there a conspiracy going on here? I don't know that there is. I think I've said it from all along. Like I said, it's simply somebody fucked something up. So we got to cover that up. Oh, we got to cover up that we covered that up. We got to cover up that part too. Oh crap, I got to cover up that now, and it just layer, and then it starts
Spirals out of
looking
control.
really bad. This is what I think happened with Karen Reed too, where it's not necessarily a crime that they're covering up, as if they were one of them was involved or something of that nature, meaning the police force, but more so just incompetency or bad work, and
Yeah.
then it starts looking really, really bad. And in the
Again, it
meantime,
goes to back to the victims' families. They're
yeah,
the ones still paying the price for it.
exactly. Then they have to pay the price for it. They have to go down this road with this man who may not very likely be guilty, but they want justice. So they're going to have a preconceived a bias there of, well, maybe he should be. They want somebody to go down. I'm not speaking for them, but they were testifying, and I can tell from what we can see. They're hoping they got their guy, but who knows at the end of the day.
I hope that at the end of this, whatever the verdict is that everyone is 100% convinced it is what it is,
Yeah.
because if it's not, if someone walks away, especially the victims, and say, "I hope we were right,"
Mhm.
that means for the rest of your life there's going to be doubt,
Yeah.
and it's not fair.
I agree. It's I just don't know that we're ever going to get to that in this case.
Not yet.
Yeah, hopefully, we get somewhere close. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.